You want to go back to the gold standard, eh? That would solve all of our problems, Josh. Well, let's take a look, shall we? So here we got a guy who posts the gold standard, and this is from the Federal Reserve, by the way, not a guy, the Fed. All right, the gold standard and other institutions of that system promised efficiency and stability. The American economy grew rapidly. The United States experienced among the world's fastest growth rates of income per capita. But the growth of the nation's wealth obscured to some extent social and financial problems such as periodic panics and depressions. Let's take a look. And so we have Stephanie up here, Stephanie Kelton, who's the queen of MMT, and she's a good spokesman for MMT. She's attractive, she's smart, she's quick on her feet. I like her. I follow her. I just started following her actually, but on X, I've been following her for a while. But anyway, yes, the 1880s and 1890s, budget surpluses, the gold standard, and no meddling Federal Reserve. I would have been successful if it wasn't for that meddling Federal Reserve. We would have been successful. If you ignore all the banking panics, the financial crisis, the social unrest, and the resulting depression, it was really the best of times. And I could not agree more. I'm reading this book right now by my man, passed on right here. This is called The Depression of the 90s in Economic History. And it's not the 90s of 1990s or the 1890s, by Charles Hoffman. He had written this initially in 1959, and then he redid it in 1970. I just want to share with you a couple things here. All right, this is freaking nuts, dude. Gross private domestic investment, 1890 to 1902, in current dollars, all right, nominal dollars, all right. We had 0.283 billion, so basically $283 million of business inventories in 1890. Change in business inventories, all right. So it grew by $283 million in 1890. You know how much it grew by in 1894? I don't even know what that is, $91,000. It went down from a growth of 283 million. I guess that's 91,000, 0.091. All right, and then it dropped 9% in 1891. It went up 23% in 1892. It dropped 17% in 1893. It dropped another 8% in 1894. It went up 6.5% in 1895. It dropped another 12% in 1896. That's a change in business inventories. Shoops. It gets worse, my friends. Right here. New private non-farming dwelling units changed. It went down 22% in 1891. It was up 25% in 1892. But again, if you're down 25%, you need to be up 33% just to break even. Just keep that in mind. It went down 23% in 1893. This is new housing projects. It went down 22, 23, 10%, 6% in 1892. It was about a third lower in 1902 than it was in 1890. Crazy. That's residential non-farm dwelling units. It's crazy. The expenditures in terms of how much they actually spent was down about 20%. That's over 12 years. It's insane, man. Net capital formation. It was down more than half from 1890 to 1902. Net capital formation. Housekeeping residential real estate in millions of current dollars. It was down $681 million to $310 million 12 years later. Let's read what Charles says. The 1892 level was not achieved again until $1900 in current dollars and 1901 in real dollars. The severe declines in investment in 1893, 94, and 1896 are a major explanation of the deep economic contraction. Declines in construction and equipment already inferred from the incomplete data of 15 years previous were accompanied by sharper drops in accumulations and inventories in the same years, reaching a staggering 75% drop from 1893 and 1894 and another 55% in 1896. It is important to note that these declines occurred within a broader framework from 1890 to 1902, which, let's see here, the peaks of 1890 and 1892 in construction were never attained again until 1902. The 90s were a deeply depressed period for building construction and thus a major factor retarding economic growth. Crazy. Crazy. There's no Federal Reserve. Let me show you something here. But if we had the Federal Reserve, we could avoid all this. Now, let's take a look. I want to show you something. Murray Rothbard, one of the kings of the Austrian School of Economics. I like Murray. Look, I'm a member of the Mises, or I donate to the Mises Institute there in Auburn, Alabama. Big fan, long time. The Panic of 1819, Reactions and Policies. The Panic of 1819, and I haven't read this yet, I need to, but the Panic of 1819 was, look, man, I have the, was Nassim Nicholas Taleb call it the anti-library. Every time I read a book, I gather 25,000 more. It's like porn. It's like freaking prepper porn, because I have prepper porn and I also have book porn too, which is like, I got to get this book, and they just sit there and I read them, but it takes a long time to read because I actually think about it and write it, and it's nuts, man. Anyway, I love it. I thank you for being here to allow me to do this. By the way, don't forget to paw that like button. Do it for Pablo. Do it for Pablo. Paw that like button, and then lick the like button for Finnegan, would you please? All right, so let's keep going here. The Panic of 1819 was America's first great economic crisis. All right. Let's see here. I want to show you something right here, because he blames it. I thought this was very interesting. It says the Panic of 1819 grew largely out of the changes wrought by the War of 1812 and by the post-war boom that followed. The war also brought a rash of paper money as the government borrowed heavily to finance the conflict. This would inevitably lead to the suspension of specie payments in some parts of the economy. Free from the shackles of hard money, says Rothbard, the suspension of specie led to a boom, and what peace came, so did the bust. Now, I find that very interesting. Because 1890s, we didn't have that. There was no fiat currency. World War I, we had the Federal Reserve. We also have big upgrades we had big inflation and a small depression after World War I. World War II, same thing. Vietnam, Medicare, all that expansion. Vietnam War, essentially, in the 1960s, going in the 1970s, and OPEC and all that. Weird. It's almost like it's not actually the fiat currency that does it. It's almost like it's war that creates the inflation and then the falling deflation. Let's take a look, actually. Let me show you something. I'm going to show you. So let's take a look. With hard money, 1871, deflation. Look, that's deflation in the red. Deflation. Look at that. 1871 to 9. Look at that, dude. 1871 to 1902. Look at that massive amount. Let me just put it on here. Let's go. Oh yeah, go do like this. Do you see all that that deflation? Look at that. I mean, that is not good, man. You don't want to be. You're not going to invest in an economy. Look at that. That has no growth. You're not. People think deflation is a good thing. Prices go down. That means no investment is happening. Look at that. All right, so now we're going to go. So I mean, you can argue all day long it's the Federal Reserve and the fiat currency, but what caused an inflation and war and booms and busts? What caused this? Crazy. So now we go to inflation starting in 1916, and then we had a deflationary time, significant deflationary time, because Silent Cal, he kept the government out of it. We didn't have a mass deflation, a la the Great Depression or the depressions of the 1890s. That was a war inflation. You can't blame the Federal Reserve for war inflation. You can't. You can't say, oh, the Federal Reserve fiat currency is causing inflation. It's war, man. Blame the freaking Department of Defense, or back then the Department of War. Now we have the Great Depression here. No war in there, and people say, well, what caused the Great Depression? Well, even Milton Friedman said the contraction of the monetary supply is what caused the Great Depression. We can argue with this, but it's certainly not a fiat currency that caused the Great Depression, the booms and busts. It's just not true. Just not true. Not an expansion of the monetary supply like in the 1920s that caused the great expansion, and then a contraction of monetary supply that caused the bust. It's just not true relative to what you think about an expansion of the monetary supply, like the Venezuelan currency or the Zimbabwean currency. It's just not true. Then we have right here the war right here. Look, inflation. Oh, inflation. Oh, well, that's weird. Look at that. Inflation. Is that caused by expansion of the fiat currency? No, it's caused by the end of the war. Remember, we had price controls and stuff, man. It's so frustrating to me. Like, people say, oh, the inevitable issue is that if you go to war, there will be inflation, a boom and a bust. That's all. And if you want to call it a boom, it's not a boom because people are dying, buildings are being destroyed, there are price controls, there's conscription. That's not a boom. It's insanity. You think the gold standard of Bitcoin is going to fix this? It's nuts. Yeah, but Josh, the federal government's taking on so much debt. And I'll show you what else Stephanie talks about here. If I can find it, I can tell you. Mohammed El Arian, I think he used to be with BlackRock. Maybe I can't remember. What's the PIMCO? I can't remember. But him and Bill Gross used to be partners in crime. And I say crime in all endearment. They're not committing crimes. Just so any trolls out there. The U.S. government budget deficit hit its highest since the COVID pandemic in 2024, propelled by increased debt interest costs. That's what they always say, the debt interest costs, and higher Social Security spending. And then Stephanie says on the other side of the ledger, a financial surplus in non-government sector. Exactly. Funny how that always goes unnoticed. And this is what I always talk about all the time. It's like, dude, when the federal government, this interest is, I might haven't combed my hair. My wife did cut it though. Look at that. Looking good. You're so handsome, Josh. See with your hair all messed up and your teeth, your pearly yellow's not being brushed. Don't forget to smooch that like button. Smooch it. All right. Anyway, so when the federal government is running interest, is paying interest, it doesn't just go in this abyss. Someone's receiving the interest. Who are the beneficiaries of the interest? It's the people on the bonds. Who own the bonds? Oh, mostly it's the United States citizens. They're receiving the interest off the federal government's interest payments. It's not China. It's not Japan. A little bit, not much. It's us. We're the recipients of the interest. You are stacking your cash because the federal government's taking on the debt. Look, does that mean this is inevitable? We can print. No one knows. That's the thing. No one knows. Everyone will say, oh, no. No one knows, dude. But the idea that some kind of fiat currency is going to lead to mass inflation, the evidence just doesn't exist for this, man. I mean, you have a little bit piece of evidence, but you can't say this correlation equals cause. You just can't say the correlation equals causation. It just does not. And as such, stop worrying about it, but certainly don't advocate for going back to the gold standard. Are you crazy? I mean, just right here, dude. We have evidence on top of evidence on top of evidence that the hard money was not a growth economy. It just wasn't. And if you're not growing, you're not investing, man. You have to no one is going to invest in an economy that's backsliding. All right, love your thoughts. God bless. We'll see you.